Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive, and today we're tackling RawTherapee's selective editing tool.
Yeah.
It's part of this amazing free open source photo editor,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
RawTherapee. It's incredible. It rivals some of those big names you got to pay for.
Right.
But this tool in particular, it took me a while to really wrap my head around it.
Oh,
I
yeah.
kind of felt lost at first.
It's powerful, but it's
Yeah, and then I stumbled across this YouTube tutorial by Jacob Swing.
okay.
And it just blew my mind. He was using it to adjust eye color, and I was like, wait a minute, this thing can do that.
Interesting.
And it just, like, all the possibilities just opened up in my head, you
I
know?
could see that. Yeah.
So for our listeners who might be new to raw therapy, what is this selective editing tool all about?
Well, it's kind of like think about Lightroom's brush-based approach, right?
Oh, okay.
But instead of painting adjustments, you're actually selecting specific areas and you can customize the shapes and everything.
So it's more about, like, isolating than kind of painting over broadly.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like a virtual scalpel for your images.
Ah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so you're targeting.
So that's why it's so good for, like, wildlife photography, right?
Absolutely, especially for things like birds.
You can just, like, tweak the sharpness of an eye without messing with the feathers.
Precisely. You can adjust sharpness, color contrast, brightness, you name it, and apply those adjustments only to the areas you choose.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So much control.
Yeah, it's a lot of control.
So how do you actually use this thing? What are the steps involved?
Well, you start by choosing a shape, either elliptical or rectangular,
Yeah.
but you can really tweak them to fit any form.
Okay.
And each selection, Raw Therapy calls it a spot, can be named and adjusted independently.
Wait, so like I could have a spot for the bird's eye, and then another spot for the beak,
Yep.
and then another one for like a specific feather if I wanted to.
Absolutely. And you can adjust each one separately, add, remove, or even duplicate spots.
Wow. Talk about flexibility. That's impressive.
Yeah, it makes the workflow really smooth.
So there's got to be a bit of a learning curve here, right? Where should someone start if they're totally new to this?
Besides those YouTube tutorials you mentioned, there's a great article on open source photography.
Okay.
It's called Raw Therapy Local Adjustment Tool, or Selective Editing. And it goes really deep into the tool and how it's evolved over time.
We'll be sure to link that in the show notes for everyone.
Sounds good.
But before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's talk about how this tool works in practice. What are some of the key features or settings someone should know about starting out?
Well, one of the first things you'll notice is spot size, which controls how big or small your selection is.
Okay, got it.
And then you have transition values, which control how gradually those adjustments blend into the surrounding area.
Ooh, transition values. That sounds important. Why would I want to control how the adjustments blend?
Well, you don't want your edits to look like they were just slapped onto the image.
Right.
You want a smooth, natural look.
Gotcha. So it's about making it look realistic. Are there any other settings that are super important for a beginner to understand?
Definitely feathering is another big one, similar to transition values, but it controls the softness of the edge of your selection.
Okay, and what about shape detection? I've heard that term thrown around.
Yeah, that one's great. It can automatically select areas with clear edges, like a building against the sky.
Oh, that's cool.
And of course, you can adjust things like tone, curve, noise reduction, all within your selected area.
Wow, it's like a toolkit within a toolkit.
Yeah, you can really fine-tune everything.
And I bet seeing the effects in real time helps a lot too.
Oh, absolutely. You can experiment and tweak until you get exactly what you're going for.
This is great. There's so much to unpack here. I'm sure we'll get into some specific examples and techniques as we go.
For sure.
But before we move on, is there anything else you want to add about the basics of this tool?
I think it's really important to remember that this tool is just one part of a bigger editing workflow.
Oh, right. So it's not about using it in isolation.
No, it's about integrating it into your entire editing process.
So you're saying, like, start with basic adjustments to the whole image.
Exactly. Things like exposure, white balance, contrast.
Right, the foundation.
And then use the selective editing tool to refine those specific areas you want to fine-tune.
So you're enhancing, not completely transforming.
That's the idea, yeah.
I like that analogy. It's like laying the groundwork and then adding those finishing touches.
Exactly.
And it works with other tools in raw therapy too, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. For example, you might brighten a subject's face with the selective editing tool and then use another tool to adjust the overall vibrancy.
So it's all about understanding how it fits in with all the other features.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm starting to get the picture here, but I'm curious how you personally use this tool in your workflow. What are some of your go-to techniques or tips?
Well, one technique I use a lot is what I call the microcontrast boost.
Micro contrast boost. That sounds interesting. Tell me more.
It's great for landscapes or architecture, when you want to make those textures and details really pop.
Micro contrast boost, huh? How do you pull that off?
It's actually something I picked up from that Jacob Swing tutorial we were talking about.
Right.
He uses it to make the eyes sharper, but you can use the same idea for any detail you want to emphasize.
Oh, you mean like when he uses that S-curve on the tone curve?
Exactly. Yeah, that subtle S shape boosts the contrast in the midtones, and then you can use the selective editing tool to fine-tune the sharpness even more.
So you're like zeroing in on those tiny details.
Yeah, you're amplifying the contrast that's already there instead of just boosting the contrast for the whole image.
Oh, that's smart. So like in a landscape, I could use that to bring out the texture of bark on a tree.
Exactly, or details in the mountains off in the distance.
It's more than just brightening or darkening. You're really shaping how we see those details.
Exactly. It's about guiding the viewer's eye to what you want them to see.
Cool. So micro contrast boost. What other techniques do you use a lot?
Well, there's selective saturation.
Okay.
Sometimes the colors are good overall, but you want one specific thing to really stand out.
Like a flower in a field or a red car on a gray street.
Yeah, you want to boost the color, but not make the whole picture look weird.
Exactly.
So you just create a spot around that one thing, the flower or the car, and boost the saturation just there.
So you're not touching the rest of the image.
Nope, just that one element.
It's a much more subtle effect then.
Exactly. The viewer's eye is drawn to that pop of color naturally.
It's like adding emphasis without messing up the color balance of the photo.
Exactly.
What about mistakes? Are there any common traps people fall into when they're first starting out with this tool?
One thing is going too far with the adjustments. Remember, subtlety is key.
Yeah, I can see how you could get carried away.
It's better to start small and gradually increase the adjustments until you like what you see.
It's like having a superpower. You got to learn to control it.
Yeah. And another one is forgetting about those transition values.
Right? If the transitions are too harsh, it'll look fake.
Exactly. Got to keep things smooth and natural.
And don't be afraid to play around, right?
Oh, absolutely. Experiment. Try different things. See what works for you. That's how you really learn.
There's no one right way to do it.
Nope. It's all about your own creative vision.
So for someone who's feeling a bit overwhelmed, what would you recommend as a starting point?
Start simple. Pick one thing you want to enhance, like the eyes or a detail in the background.
Okay.
Create a spot just around that, and then play with the different sliders.
Get a feel for how it works.
Exactly, and then you can start adding more spots and getting more complex.
Build up that confidence.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about how to USE the tool, but what about its impact on photography as a whole? What do you think?
That's an interesting question.
I think it's a big shift in how we think about photo editing,
Okay.
It's not about global adjustments anymore. It's about being precise and intentional.
It's like going from a sledgehammer to a scalpel.
Exactly. And the fact that it's in a free open source software like RawTherapee is huge.
It is. Everyone can access these techniques now.
Yeah.
You don't need to shell out for expensive software.
Right. It levels the playing field.
It's all about empowering photographers.
Exactly.
What about the creative potential? We've talked about practical uses, but can you use it for more artistic stuff too?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I think that's where it really shines. You can go beyond just fixing things or making them look better. You can create surreal effects or abstract compositions. You can even tell a story with subtle adjustments. It's like you're reshaping reality.
That's a cool way to think about it.
Yeah.
So many possibilities.
Exactly. It's all about imagination and experimentation.
Okay, so we've talked about how to use the tool, some techniques, its impact, and its creative potential. What's your final advice for our listeners who are ready to dive in? What would you say to encourage them?
Just go for it.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid of it. Just start playing around.
Yeah, I like that. Don't be intimidated. Just have fun with it.
Exactly, because photography should be fun, right?
Absolutely. It's about expressing yourself and, connecting with the world.
Yeah, and the selective editing tool, it's just another way to do that, to make your vision even stronger, to tell your stories better.
It's funny. We started talking about this tool like it was some kind of puzzle.
Yeah.
But now it feels more like we've been opening up a treasure chest.
I like
Every time we find something new, it's like, wow, there's even more.
The more you dig into it, the more you realize how much it can do.
And that's what's so great about open source software, right?
Absolutely.
It keeps getting better and better thanks to this whole community of people who are passionate about it.
Right.
And for us photographers, that means we get to use these amazing tools that are always pushing the limits.
It's a great time to be a photographer.
It is. So for our listeners out there, here's my challenge to you.
Okay.
Don't just listen to us talking about it.
Yeah.
Go download Raw Therapy and start using this tool.
Yeah, give it a try. See what you can do.
Push yourself. Experiment. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. That's how we learn.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe you'll be the one sharing your own amazing techniques someday.
Inspiring others. That's what it's all about.
It would be awesome to see this community keep growing and everyone pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Well said. All right, everyone, that's our deep dive into Raw Therapy's selective editing tool.
Hope you enjoyed it.
We hope you learned something, and most importantly, that you're excited to go out and take some amazing photos.
And don't forget, if you want to really dig deep into this tool, check out that article we mentioned.
Yeah. Raw Therapy, Local Adjustment Tool, or Selective Editing on Open Source Photography.
It'll give you all the details.
Until next time, happy editing, everyone.